to speed things up, because we are short-staffed, we're allowing people into the country without first doing that security screening.
That doesn't sound like a good idea. Folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we got quite a few things to take a look at. Ever since the budget passed, there's been a few announcements and reports in regards to housing, immigration, security. So without further ado, let's dive into the news. Now, my last video was just before the budget passed, and since then, Mark Carney has decided to hop on his jet, fly over to the UAE, and then he'll be going to South Africa for the G20 summit, which Donald Trump and the US are actually not going to be attending. As I mentioned, the budget passed. They keep talking about all this generational wealth. However, there's been more and more reports and announcements coming out about how unaffordable life is, the housing market, immigration, affordability, as well as our security. And there's a lot of overlap happening. And now, in regards to housing, take a look at this report.
CTV's Adrian Gobriel does a deeper dive into navigating the housing market. Adrian.
Sandy, the housing picture has a different facade depending on where you're located in the country. Here north of Toronto in Newmarket, Ontario, a single mother bought this home behind me back in 2017. Now desperate to sell, for months she struggled to even get a single offer.
I have to basically beg people to come and just even look at the house. I've been struggling.
Mariam Musavi admits she's barely making ends meet. As a real estate agent in the Greater Toronto Area, her net income has dropped significantly as housing sales have dried up.
200 to 300K versus for past year, I think I didn't make more than 50K.
The national average sale price of a home sold in October was just over $690,000, down 1.1% from a year ago, according to the Canadian Real Estate Association.
If you're in Quebec or you're in Saskatchewan or you're in Atlantic, you're in good shape. If you're in Ontario or British Columbia or maybe even Calgary, you got some issues.
This home east of Toronto was purchased in September 2024 for $2.3 million. Last month, it sold for $1.2 million, a seven-figure drop due to a power of sale.
Once the banks don't receive a full payment, they will notify the borrower. If it's not fully caught up at the end of 3 months, the banks will turn, by law, the banks will turn the house over to their legal group to move forward with a power of sale or foreclosure action. They're up 90% compared with what they were just a few months ago.
Losing her home to the banks is a real possibility for Musavi if she can't sell her home soon.
I almost lost the house. With no income, I couldn't even pay my mortgage, and I have to sell the house.
The Canadian Real Estate Association expects the country's housing market to become more active in 2026, though some mortgage and housing experts we spoke with say that the economic uncertainty could lead to prolonged pain for many.
Now, that is a huge discrepancy in salary, going from 200 to 300K down to 50K. And we're also seeing that with all of the houses that keep going up for sale. At least in my area, all I see are for sale signs, and they are sitting up there for weeks on end because nobody can actually afford it. And these people are even dropping the prices, as you saw in that report, lower than what they paid for the house just because they can't afford the new payments. Now, another report came out, and these are kind of focused more in the GTA or bigger provinces, but take a listen to what they say here about the ties to immigration as well as housing.
People in Toronto owning a home feels more like a fantasy than a future. A new City News poll shows the dream of buying has hit a breaking point, with 3/4 of non-homeowners saying it's never going to happen. And that frustration appears to be aimed at City Hall. In a city where million-dollar listings are the norm, hope is in short supply. A new City News Rogers poll by Canada Pulse Insights finds 75% of renters and non-homeowners across Toronto believe they'll never own a home.
And you find 3/4 of those aged 18 to 34, so the young people have basically given up hope for this city.
The poll shows the biggest barrier isn't saving for a down payment. It's the price tag itself. 80% say homes and condos are simply too expensive.
The federal government has put in place some tools that can be used for first-time home buyers so they can save some money and grow it over time in order to have a down payment. But the problem is, as well, is that the price is out of reach. So what the poll shows is even if those pieces are in place, it's not enough to reach up the ladder.
The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board says affordability has slightly improved, but warns the city is still years behind on building enough homes.
But I think longer term, we're going to absorb a lot of that standing inventory. So thinking, say, 5 years or 10 years down the road, if we don't continue to build the right types of housing in the GTA, ultimately we're going to get to the point where we were, say, 2 and 3 years ago, where there's not a lot of inventory again, and you're seeing a lot of competition.
And it's not just home ownership. 3/4 call the rental market bad or terrible. The poll also takes aim at leadership. Only 18% of Torontonians think Mayor Olivia Chow has made progress on affordable housing, and nearly 3/4 say there's been little to no improvement. In response, the mayor's office says in a statement, the mayor knows housing is the city's biggest affordability challenge, saying city-led projects now make up 65% of housing starts. That includes thousands of new affordable units. Our approval process, once among the lowest in North America, is now 80% faster. Further, over the past 2 years, Toronto has rezoned nearly 90% of the city to allow for more housing options.
There's no evidence that houses are being built. There's a lot of talk at federal, provincial, local level, but there doesn't seem to be any more supply. And as a result, there's a lot of pessimism out there.
As for what's driving the crisis, 62% blame population pressures from immigration, not developers or landlords.
So he flat out just says that there's no evidence that the federal or provincial government is doing anything to fix this situation, and 62% of people say that it's due to immigration. Now, we already know that when you flood the system with a ton of outsiders, there's not enough supply for the demand. But Carney, on a recent interview, said that this is a good thing. He said that almost 50% of people here in Toronto are born from outside the country, but that you wouldn't know because they assimilate so well.
In our country, it's in many respects the best of Canada because it's all of Canada in one place. As you know, virtually half of the people in the greater GTA were born outside this country. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it because they quickly become Canadian. We're enriched by them.
Now, call me crazy, but if you're bringing the conflict and drama from your other country here, like the Sikhs and the Hindus, or the Khalistanis, the Bishnoi terrorist attacks that are happening here, or conflicts that are going on, when you have people who are pro-Palestine burning the Canadian flag, putting up their flag during our city hall, these are not people that are assimilating. And we need to know who these people are because this is potentially a security risk as you keep seeing all these videos of shootouts, people's houses being shot, businesses being shot. These are not the people we want in our country. But as Mark Weber here, for the gentleman that you saw at the opener, said, they're letting like 10,000 people in. 10% of the people that are coming in are not actually being recorded properly. And Mark Weber was the first one to kind of put the signal out in regards to our ports not being scanned properly, as well as our rails not being scanned at all. I don't know if you remember, but this was him on Global News like about a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we do have good intelligence. We work very hard at it. Again, it's simply a matter of more. We need more people. We need more equipment. We search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Modes like rail.
Less than 1%.
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure. Wow. We don't have the people to actually do that work.
So he's been really trying to push the signal that we need better security. And just 2 days ago in the Standing Committee for Citizenship and Immigration, this is what he had to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses today. Mr. Weber, in your testimony, you spoke about the one-touch system and talked about how there's little interaction with the human in that system. Are we talking about the machines that when I come across the border back from Canada, I put my stuff in there and is that what you're talking about, or is this something different?
Different system. Those would be pick machines. For refugee claimants, when they arrive into the country, previously they used to get a full interview with an officer. Security screening was done there. That's changed to a system that's called One Touch. So essentially, we get tombstone data, we do some biometrics, and the claimant is then allowed into the country to complete their security screening and such on their own through the One Touch system. They have, I believe it's 45 days to submit that, meaning, in essence, to speed things up, because we are short-staffed, we're allowing people into the country without first doing that security screening.
Okay, hold on a second here. So you're saying that a refugee claimant coming to Canada goes to a machine and says, I want to be a refugee in Canada, hits a button, and they're in the country? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not a machine, it's an application. So the One Touch system, they're given instructions on how to use that. That connects directly with IRCC, and they're given that documentation to complete on their own once they're in the country. We're not doing that.
So basically, they take out their phone, theoretically, and they tap it a few times, and they are now in the country as a refugee accepted by our country.
Yes, we get some basic data from them, and again, we do the biometrics. But beyond that, they're doing that on their own, yes.
So no human interaction. Your members do not ask any questions, don't confirm anything. It's a free-for-all into the country that way?
Very little. I don't know if I'd use the term free-for-all, but for the most part, it's self-declaration on the claimant's part, yes.
And so from your perspective and your members' perspective, this is not a good thing?
This is a terrible thing. It's during the interview, and again, I spoke to it in my opening statement about human interaction. That's where we ask follow-up questions. That's where we establish whether there's coaching, whether it's a legitimate claim. That's how those files are built so they can be dealt with properly. Later, that's where we gain that intelligence, and that's currently been lost, not to mention that about 10% never complete the forms through One Touch. So you figure with about 100,000 claimants a year, that's about 10,000 people who are allowed into Canada who they disappear. Then it's our inland officers then have to find them and remove them, so you're adding additional burdens down the road.
So 10,000 potential false claimants coming into that system that have to be removed. Wow.
Now, what I found most interesting in this committee hearing was that after he made these claims and he said what he said, when it went to the Liberal member to question him, she just stuck to the talking points that was on her sheet. She didn't diverge. She even had enough time at the end to say she's done with her questioning. Like, it's as if they don't really even care. Now, when we move back to the Conservative member, he brought up the fact that CBSA has already testified before that they're looking for over 30,000 individuals who are lost in the ether, I guess. And with his extra now 10% that are coming through without actually being secure, this causes a big problem. And he mentions, like, shouldn't Canadians feel like they are being secure and safe to be walking around with these people if they are coming from another country?
Mr. Weber, you said something powerful in your speech, in your opening remarks to us. You used the words reduced security for the sake of expediency. That's very, very, very concerning. And then in response to some questions from my colleague, Mr. Redderkop, did you say it takes 45 days for someone after they get that initial one-touch system where they basically, pass the biometrics and fill in a few things? They have 45 days to self-administer the rest of the questionnaire and respond?
That's correct.
And how many of those in that period of time were deemed inadmissible?
So inadmissibility is deemed later on in the process. Again, our goal at the border is to build the file to be able to, identify non-genuine claims, right? And right now we're kind of relying on people to self-declare that they're a non-genuine claim. That's unlikely.
And you don't have them in front of you. You can't speak to them. You're just giving you a document that says, no, I'm not a criminal. I'm a good person.
Yes.
And I'm coming into the country, so let me stay in the country. At a time when CBSA has testified before this committee that they're trying to find 30,000 people in Canada that need to leave the country that are not here at this time. I want to touch base with you about one other thing. Is you mentioned additional resources and getting more people. So I looked in the 406-page budget that the government put forth in Parliament for immigration, refugees, and citizens to see what's in there for immigration. And very much to my surprise, the very opening line written in only the one-page document on page 311 that deals with immigration, despite the massive problems we're having with the file in the country. The very opening line is to meet up to 15% in savings targets over 3 years. The IRCC is rationalizing programming and so forth. How do you see that affecting your members?
I mean, our members are not IRCC. I have a lot of sympathy, and our members do too, for what they go through. The one-touch system I described, essentially when claimants complete that goes directly to IRCC. That's out of our hands, and they're given all that additional work while we, talk about massive cuts.
But you're doing really important work, and your work is, ensuring that the people that come into this country are safe to walk around in our communities. But you're being hampered because you don't have the resources to do that. They put in a system that, as you say, reduces security, but is more expedient. Canadians have an expectation that the people that are allowed into the country are safe to walk around in our streets, in our communities, around our schools, around our community centers. So it's shocking that committed officers with conviction, your members, who want to make sure that the border is as safe as possible, don't have the right tools to be able to do that. Now, you also mentioned about the morale, so I want to ask you that about that. How are your members dealing with the strain of having, 300,000 pending asylum claims on top of what they're dealing with every day?
Now, Mark Weber's answer to this question was quite shocking as well, because he was saying that instead of utilizing people who maybe can't use the firearm anymore, who have lots of training, who have experience, and they can maybe train the next batch of people, or they can be moved into a different department. Say they could be the ones conducting the interviews to make sure that the people coming over are secure and proper. They're just being forced out by medical retirement. And he actually emphasizes that the opposite, another pilot project that showed that when you put these people in these different roles, you have a better result than just this application where people get to do it themselves.
Yeah, that's a heavy load to carry. We score last in the Public Service Employee Survey. We were in the last one. Occasionally we get up to second to last, but we're fairly regularly down at the bottom. I think this is part of it. I think management culture where management does not come from the ranks, where you have people making decisions who never worked at a border, who've never worn a uniform, who don't understand, again, the details of how any of these processes work. That's a big issue. I think how our accommodated officers are dealt with. I mentioned it briefly in my opening statement. Currently, we have about 200 accommodated officers, and I say accommodated, they can do almost the full job, except they cannot carry the firearm for injury. Some were injured during use of force training. CBSA is having them look at forced medical retirement rather than taking them and using that expertise and that knowledge. We're talking mostly seasoned officers who would be able to do things like process these claimants rather than go through one touch. There was a pilot program in Niagara Falls where they had accommodated officers do exactly this, and they were able to process faster than one touch was able to do it and give the full interview. Those are the kinds of things that we look to the CBSA to work on and to bring us back to interdiction rather than facilitation, and they don't. It's easier to treat your employees as a number who are disposable employees, right?
So we have a flood of immigration, no proper security checks for a good handful of them. We have increased violence due to all these people that we don't know if they're safe or unsafe. Potential casualties because of all this increased violence. With the flood of people coming in, our housing supply is not being able to keep up with the demand. Like, our country is just crumbling left, right, and center, and the Liberals are doing nothing. But hey, they passed their big budget, right? There's going to be generational wealth soon to come, I am sure. With all that being said, folks, let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.